Week 14 is upon us, and for the first week of the playoffs in fantasy football. And here's 5 tight ends you should start this week. The first guy is Eric Ebron of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Ebron last week, he had some drop problems, but he still finished the ball game versus Washington with 7 catches, 68 yards. And Ebron, he's a main target over there in Pittsburgh. He's a guy, he's had double-digit fantasy points now, 6 out of his last 7 games, and he's one of the better tight ends in all of pro football. And Ebron this week, he's got a cupcake matchup versus the Buffalo Bills, who give up the 3rd most fantasy points to tight ends. So Ebron, I could expect him again over here, getting anywhere from 12 to 15 fantasy points. Like I said, he's a main target there in Pittsburgh, and teams, they're not really focusing on Ebron with all the weapons Ben and that offense has with Deontay Johnson, Claypool, Juju, and Connor. So this week versus Buffalo, they're vulnerable to giving up points to tight ends. And this week, I think it's another good week for Ebron. And he's a guy you pretty much start each and every week. So he's the first guy I'm starting at tight end. The second guy is Logan Thomas of the Washington football team. Thomas had a career day last week versus the Pittsburgh Steelers in that shocking victory with 9 catches, 98 yards, and a touchdown. And this week, yeah, he does have a tough matchup on paper versus the San Francisco 49ers is Thomas. But Thomas, after a hot game like that, I got to start him, even though the Niners give up the least amount of fantasy points to tight ends. But Thomas, he's getting targets. Him and Smith, they're starting to get things going. And now he's got over 12 fantasy points in his last 2 games. And now he's got San Francisco here. I think he's going to find the end zone in this one as well. I could see 40, 50 yards on 3 or 4 catches and a touchdown. And Thomas, they're using him in different ways as well, lining up in the Wildcat, using him as end arounds as a quarterback. So he's a big part of the offense. He's been a playmaker now for this team, and he's a guy you pretty much got to start each and every week. The 3rd tight end I'm going to start this week's Mike Gesicki of the Miami Dolphins. Gesicki, he surprised me now over the last few weeks after he didn't do anything really for the most part. And Gesicki last week had the best game of his career as a pro. Huge fantasy day versus Cincinnati, 9 catches, 88 yards, and a touchdown. So the Cincinnati, that was an easy matchup for Gesicki. He took advantage of it, but this week things are going to get tougher now. They versus the Kansas City Chiefs, who give up the 12th amount of fantasy points to tight ends. But I think this Chief defense, they're going to focus in on Gesicki and try to make Tua throw the ball on the outside more. But Gesicki, after 2 good games, I just got to put him in there this week. And tight end, it's not many great options out there. This week I ranked Gesicki 13th overall, my tight end rankings. Check that out. But I think Gesicki can have a decent game, or he could go the other way. He's a guy who's inconsistent. But if you have him on your roster, you most likely don't have one of these other great tight ends. So Gesicki, I think he's a start. The 4th tight end I'm going to start this week is Dallas Goedert of the Philadelphia Eagles. I know Zach Ertz came back last week, but Goddard, he still had a good ball game. 5 catches, 66 yards on 7 targets. This week he's got a decent matchup versus New Orleans. Well, I think this ball game, they're going to be trailing early, and Jalen Hurts, the rookie quarterback, he's starting, I know, but I think he's going to have to throw a lot in this one, and that spells good for Dallas Goedert and this offense. I think Goddard, he could get 70, 80 yards on 6 or 7 catches and have a good game in this one. And the 5th and final tight end I'm starting this week is Robert Tonyan of the Green Bay Packers. This guy, he's been going off now the last 3 weeks after he didn't do much. He was a guy I said drop, but I was wrong. Robert Tonyan now, one of the best tight ends in all of fantasy football. In the last 3 weeks, he's been on a tear. Week 11 versus Indy, he had a big game. 5 catches, 44 yards, and a touchdown, 15 fantasy points. Week 12, 5 catches, 67 yards, and a touchdown versus Chicago. And last week versus Philly, 4 catches, 39 touchdowns. And this week at Detroit, I expect more of the same from Tonyan. I could see him getting 5 or 6 catches in this one, 40, 50 yards, and finding the end zone again. Right now, he seems like he's the number 3 option in that offense. It goes obviously Davante Adams, Aaron Jones, and him. So Tonyan, he's been a mismatch. Him and Rodgers, they're connecting. And he's having some great ball games. So that's 5 tight ends I'm starting here heading into Week 14.